I want to begin by asking you about the Venezuelan economy. You have a serious problem with inflation. You have a currency that has been devalued and your country is still in recession. Is it fair to say that socialism right now is not working?
To me, democratic socialism is the value that in a modern, moral, and wealthy society, no person in America should be too poor to live.
Yeah, you had growth, but now you do not have growth. In fact, you're the only Latin American country which this year, as well as last year, is not growing at all, is in recession.
No matter what happens, we're not going to go below this level. We should aim for every person in this country to be covered by health care.
According to Amnesty International, half of the country's hospitals across the country are closed.
To make sure that people feel stable in their housing.
Attacks against police in France are of particular concern in so-called no-go zones where officers say they can't apply the law due to migrant violence.
And as an organizer. And in this moment, right now, this political moment, democratic social, or perhaps even DSA in particular, is one of the only active organizing groups in the United States that is actively asserting that. You know, I think that so many people tap into those values. And
with all your oil, why aren't you doing better economically? Why is there poverty in your country and unemployment with all the oil you have? You should be dominant.
I think that for our generation, we kind of view the world through a very different lens. In my life, for example, I was born in 1989, and so at that point, basically when I was in middle school, 9/11 happened. So when you think about young people, it's important to think about the general timeline. The world.
Are you going to do that all day?
17, 18 years old when the financial crisis hit. We never experienced.
They're raising the premium on my life insurance policy $50 a month.
Oh, that's not fair, man. You ought to pay less as you get closer.
And a lot of what we have witnessed is the unprecedented concentration of wealth at the very tippy top of the 1%, and we've seen the consolidation of corporations.
Nobody cares, man. I mean, everybody was standing around and not one single person. Yes, solo que me da un coraje, chico. Nobody, not one person.
People are very receptive to a very strong economic message of dignity for working class Americans.
I don't understand.
Is no longer the best vehicle for working class Americans.
Well, I think the numbers that you just talked about is part of the problem, right? Because we look at these figures and we say, oh, unemployment is low, everything.
So it seems that whenever people are critical of your record, you do not accept it.
People are working 60, 70, 80 hours a week and can barely feed their kids. And so I do think that right now, when we have this no-holds-barred, Wild West hyper-capitalism, what that means is profit at any cost.
En el capitalismo es imposible la democracia. El capitalismo es el reino de la injusticia y la tiranía de los más ricos contra los más pobres. Ya lo decía Rousseau, entre el poderoso y el débil la libertad oprime, solo la ley libera. Por eso el único camino para salvar al mundo es el socialismo, un socialismo en democracia.
And it will not always exist in the world.
I'm Detective Carter. Do you speak any English? Do you understand the words that are coming out of my mouth?
Well, so I think that those things that you talk about, that you discuss, are part of the course of human evolution. And so I would hope that the most...
You don't? A blind man could see it with a cane. You're not a pet. You're not a specimen kept in a cage. You're a lover. I'm a what?
Her attitude when she approaches you is profoundly different than when she contacts us.
First of all, I think that when we talk about socialist or especially democratically socialist economies, first of all, they're done with the full input of everybody. You vote. It's democratic. So if something is not a good idea, it doesn't get voted for, ideally. And the other thing, too, is that we're starting to see that the people who create value in society are not experiencing any portion of the value.
What are you doing?
Chant. Bambi says that if I chant it, I can get whatever I want. Bambi, 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 Bambi.
I do think that absolutely capitalism was the most efficient and best economy, perhaps.
As a kid, I was victim of the most vicious propaganda ever. People kept telling me that money wasn't everything, and I believed it. Until I found out that the people who were saying that money wasn't everything were the people that had all the money.
As automation begins to really take out extremely large industries, we need to say that we're not going to throw those people away.
Oh, what happens if we can't?
Oh, well, if we can't, then we,
What kind of an answer is that?
Ultimately, we are marching towards progress on this issue.
No, it's some sort of trap.
Well, obviously it's a threat. And the bait is a cipher machine, a brand new lector.
A lector, no less.
I think it's at least a question. I think it's absolutely a question.
Yeah, go ahead and laugh. Just like they laughed at Columbus right before he discovered Ohio.
Values that you and I are still trading back and forth.
Wow.
Your opinion of Roe versus Wade? I'd prefer to float. Okay, come on now.
So I am a really firm believer that the next step in our education system is opening up colleges and trade schools to be tuition free in the United States. About every 100 or so years,
A school day begins in the slums of Caracas, but 14-year-old Maria Arias won't have a full day of classes at her high school.
Most of the teachers hardly come. We sometimes will go for 4 hours without a single class.
A grade school education. And then we as a society decided that wasn't enough, and we made universal middle school. And it wasn't until, a lot of people don't realize, it wasn't until about 1950 or 1960 that we...
Which is a move to have a federal curriculum, to have national standards, national tests. And the federal government, through the Race to the Top program, through the Obama administration's waivers from No Child Left Behind, is putting that into place. They're telling states, if you want to get out of this ridiculous, onerous No Child Left Behind law, you now have to adopt national standards, a national curriculum, and soon you'll have to adopt national tests, which, oh, by the way, the federal government is paying for.
High school in the United States. And you know what? We're now out another 70 years, and I think that...
Blackouts leave classrooms dark, and students faint from hunger.
I can't even give them money for snacks. I cannot even buy a packet of crackers and give them one to take to school, like I used to.
An amazing opportunity to, at the same time, that's how these policies work, they have to be interlinked, pursuing a program of federal student loan debt forgiveness.
Where he asked Xi Jinping if he could please borrow a cup of sugar and like $5 billion. China has already loaned Venezuela about $70 billion in the past 10 years, and apparently tens of billions haven't been paid off yet.
I would counter because, first of all, when you look at the rising amount of student debt, and then the fact that wages are largely remaining flat in the real wages are remaining flat in the United States.
I mean, come on, dogs aren't offended when you eat their food. They're offended when you're so hungry, you eat them. And if that's not bad enough, the Venezuelan currency, the Bolivar, has been a bit unstable lately. The International Monetary Fund projected 1,000,000% inflation this year alone. Wow, that's wildly unstable. It's like the Lindsay Lohan of currencies. You know, everything seemed fine in like 2004, but eventually everything just fell apart.
Folks have parents that are able to support them. And one of the largest drivers of wealth inequality in the United States is inherited wealth. So especially, really what we need to talk about is this question of social mobility.
Venezuela has just enacted a 3,500% minimum wage increase across the country, but they are not allowing businesses to increase the cost of goods and services to compensate for the wages they now have to pay.
Access and ability to move up to become part of that upper echelon.
By nearly 3,500% in one fell swoop. Many of the companies, which had been barely surviving the gradual collapse of the economy, saw the salary increase and other changes announced last month as the fatal blow in a string of policies that have been gradually strangling their operations. The problem is that Venezuelan companies are being forced to sell at prices far below cost. just as employee salaries are increasing by 60 times. The regime has banned stores from increasing their prices in order to cover the increase in salaries, arguing that it is not necessary.
Where do you stand on K-12 education reform?
Well, I think there's a lot of aspects to K-12 that we need to reassess. You know, things like No Child Left Behind has left a wake of lessons for us, watering down every child to a bubble on a test and a test score. Sometimes an over-reliance on that can hurt our educational outcomes. I think
the phone rings. It's Kiki Kornberg. I couldn't believe it. She asked me to come over because she's afraid to watch Laverne and Shirley alone.
Inequality and reducing economic inequality is our basic system of funding schools. The basic idea that the immediate property taxes of a certain zip code funds that local public schools. Because then what it does, it creates this mad dash.
Yeah, well, thanks a lot, Vinny. Because of you, I'm going to get an F in English.
Oh, Freddie, look, if it makes you feel any better, so am I.
We even fund schools is one of the basic things that we take for granted, but it could actually be one of the strongest keys in unlocking the opportunities of children in the United States.
Harry Hollywood, would you mind leaving Sunset and Vine and going back to your seat? I mean, we're about to start class.
Is immigration control, immigration reform, and the...
I said a month ago when this began that I believe George Soros was behind it because his Open Society Foundation wants open borders as well. They're simpatico, okay? I didn't know that in 2009, Soros gave this organization in Chicago $2.5 million. Is that true?
Absolutely. And you know, George Soros has no interest in the United States. He's a globalist, not a nationalist, and that's to be noted.
We have always legislated from a place of how do we exclude and who do we exclude? And I just think that that's the wrong question. I think what we need to...
It seems to me there is a very clear hierarchy of things you accept. So you accept on the left, first of all, multiculturalism. Like that is your bedrock, that's the foundation of everything. That's the number one thing you have to accept. And then things fall under that in a hierarchy that we could argue about.
When it comes to low-skilled immigration, I think that the problem with taking that approach is the assumption that people coming in are only weights.
Because the national media just won't cover it at all, correct?
Absolutely. They won't. And if you do talk about it, you're called racist. I've been called racist.
Absolutely.
I've been told, you know, a race traitor, you name it. It's really sad.
So the big national news organizations, including Fox News, they don't want any part of exposing the pipeline of money that goes down into Central America and Mexico that allows thousands of people to come here. They don't want to expose that at all.
And that's not true. Every single person is a source of economic activity, I think. And what we see is that immigrants are one of the most entrepreneurial populations in the United States.
Immigrants, that is immigrants that don't have a high school degree, whether they're legal or illegal, receive about $30,000 a year in government benefits, but they only pay about $9,000 in taxes. That means that there's about a $22,000 gap of benefits they receive that other taxpayers have to pay for. That's the equivalent of purchasing for these families a Mustang convertible each and every year of their life.
And so this idea that something is low skill and that it's going to be a weight, I think is probably a false skill.
Over the last 20 years or so, we have imported 11 million high school dropouts from abroad. If we had 11 million additional high school dropouts born in the U.S., people would say, wow, that sounds like a significant problem. But somehow when we're bringing in people with a 3rd and 4th grade education from abroad, we look on this as somehow an economic miracle that's going to benefit us all. It doesn't at all. It costs the taxpayers a fortune. The best way to think about this is that each high school dropout immigrant that we bring across the border, either legally or illegally, bears about a $1 million price tag on his neck. That will be the cost of benefits he will receive minus the taxes he pays during his lifetime.
Well, I believe absolutely in Israel's right to exist. I am a proponent of a two-state solution.
I said you didn't have to say anything.
Yes.
Yes, you confronted him?
Yes, I understand. I don't have to say anything.
On the state of Israel, for me, the lens through which I saw this incident as an activist, as an organizer.
Yes.
Yes, what?
Yes, I understand. I don't have to say anything.
In the South Bronx, unarmed. 60 people were killed in Puerto Rico.
Hey, I'm representing my people. As a matter of fact, honey, this outfit was worn by my great-great-grandmother when she fought on San Juan Hill for the Puerto Rican Jews.
It would just be completely unacceptable if that happened on our shores. But I am, of course, the dynamic.
I remember very vividly you saying many times, there will never be peace. The only thing we fight for is victory, and that is the same as destruction of Israel.
Yes, but I also think that what people are starting to see, at least in the occupation of...
Must talk to me. Yes, Herr Commandant, but we have nothing in common. What shall I say?
Humanitarian condition. And that to me is just where I tend to come from on this issue.
My philosophy of life is that people should be always very kind to each other and never worry about things too much, because when it comes to trouble, it never rains, it pours.
Oh, shut up, Schultz. Who cares about your philosophy?
Oh, I think what I meant is like the settlements that are increasing in some of these difficulty in access to their housing and homes. I am not the expert on geopolitics on this issue. You know, for me, and I'm happy to sit down with leaders on both of these. I may not use the right words. I know this is a very honest. That's very honest.
Good evening, Ahmed. Good evening, infidel.
On all sides and visit Israel and visit the West Bank. And
absolutely. And I think that's one of those things that's important too, is that you know, especially with the district that I represent. I come from the South Bronx. I come from a Puerto Rican background, and
America, la 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 la, America.
Middle Eastern politics is not exactly what's at my kitchen table every night, but I also recognize that this is an intensely important issue for people in my district, for Americans across the country. And I think what's at least important to communicate is that I'm willing to listen and that I'm willing to learn and evolve on this issue, like I think many Americans are. You know, I think for me, I try to look through President Obama's legacy through as clear eyes as I
You know, I know a primary school that handed out Clinton mints in the playground the night before in Britain. You know, the night before, literally handed out mints with Clinton on so that the kids would know Clinton was the right answer.
I thanked for him in 2008 as a young college student, and I think...
As long as it lives, the day will continue to report the facts and the meaning of those facts without fear, without distortion, without hope of personal gain, as it always has done.
His administration came in at a very difficult time. You know, he came in the pitch of a financial crisis. He came in to just, I think, unprecedented obstructionism.
And I'm talking about free enterprise, Your Honor. The right of the public to a marketplace of ideas, news, and opinions, not of one man's or one leader's or even one government's. Well, I guess that's all I have to say.
The Republican Party started putting party over people, and that has created just a very destabilizing...
But do you believe in religious tolerance?
I do.
So why do you pick on this view of the Catholic Church?
I'm just asking you.
Well, I'm not asking you. Why do you pick on the views of the Catholic
I'm
Church
not,
and say
I'm
that you
picking,
can't hold these in
I'm
modern
not,
politics?
I'm not saying you
That's
can.
exactly
I'm
what you
saying
implied.
that there are people who might have a problem with it.
You're saying that tolerance only goes so far and that you should not be tolerant
okay.
of the teaching of the Catholic Church. So isn't this stretching into religious bigotry?
Except, is it a barrier, do you think, to holding high office?
That's a different question, but that's not the one you just asked.
All right, well, that is really what I meant to say.
And this is really important to get to the heart of this, because this country believes in religious tolerance. We are a very tolerant nation. And the act of tolerance is to tolerate things you don't agree with, not just ones you do agree with. And the problem with liberal tolerance is it's got to the point of only tolerating what it likes.
I think he did his best. I do have my critiques. I think that we got a little bit too corporate friendly in terms of policies, in terms of how we recovered from the financial crisis. I don't agree with all of our foreign policy and drone strikes. But I also acknowledge that we did make progress during his presidency.
Why are you telling me all this? I've been out of the game for a long time.
Oh, well, I was told that you were wired in down here, that you knew the town, the people, that you were a player.
Who told you that?
It's my responsibility and our generation's responsibility to build on that. I actually don't think that once you win an election, you put down your clipboards and you just head to Washington and you use a totally different set of skills. There are certainly additional skills that you need when you get there. But I'm a firm believer in the fact that organizing never stops and organizing never ends. And I actually believe that there's a profound amount of power, persuasion, and influence that's possible when you organize outside that chamber to really impact what's going on inside that chamber. And one of the things that we kind of talked about on our campaign was people versus money. And I think that when you can organize a mass amount of people, you can create a lot of pressure on incumbents to change. And so for me, it's not, I don't intend to put down my bullhorn. I think that if anything, we've been trusted with a much larger one. And my constituents have hired me. They have voted for me to be a very fierce and unapologetic voice in Washington. And I don't think that that necessarily means antagonistic. I don't think that it means that you fight for the sake of fighting. But I do think it means that you don't compromise your values and your message. And I hope to at least be that kind of voice of clarity in Washington in a time when there seems to be so much discord.
Am I the reason you get stoned every week? Now I'm built up integrity. Got you texting, emailing me, wanting me to feel with you. Baby, just face reality, move on. Sometimes it's hard to face reality.